Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. This is our post-Thanksgiving show. It's the long Thanksgiving weekend. Normally we would be taping this on the so-called Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, but because of the vicissitudes of production, we're taping it actually on the evening of Tuesday, the 25th of November. So please don't imagine that we can know everything, although we have actually been pretty good, as we'll see. But what I would point to is we don't know what has actually happened in the latter part of this week, right? There's a bigger interval between our taping and the actual broadcast. So let us now begin. The question of the fall of Secretary of Defense Hagel. And here is our conclusion to begin with, and then we'll give you the motivation. The most prominently named candidate to replace Hagel at the Pentagon is a certain Michele Flournoy, Flournoy. Stop this nomination. Vote no. If you're in the Senate, vote no. If you have a senator, and everybody has two, especially the ones on the Senate Armed Services Committee, the answer to Michele Flournoy wanting to take over the Pentagon is no, no, no. She is a warmonger. She is a mask of General David Petraeus, General John Allen, and their warmonger clique. No. This woman is not qualified. She would be Rumsfeld in a skirt, but even worse, because the strings would be pulled, in this case, by the Bonapartist and enemy of democracy, General David Petraeus. Remember General Petraeus? Remember you guys from MoveOn.org? Well, this is General Petraeus coming back with a vengeance. And we'll describe this in a second. The news, as you know, is that as of last week, Secretary of Defense Hagel, appearing with a Band-Aid on his face next to General Dempsey at the House Armed Services Committee, Secretary Hagel was an opponent of the strategy of bombing Assad and essentially taking the heat off ISIS. That is the policy that Michele Flournoy would be coming in with. Michele Flournoy would be squishy soft on the terrorists from ISIS and Nusra and Al-Qaeda, and she'd be hard as nails on the Assad regime. She's incompetent. She's a fool from this point of view strategically. And you'll remember all of that blather that we've covered over the last two programs. You heard it first here, that allegedly while Obama was out of the country, there was going to be a policy review. And in that policy review, the necessity was to bomb Assad. And, of course, that would mean fewer resources to throw at ISIS and Nusra and the Islamic State and all the rest of these terrorist crazies. Remember what Hagel had said, that ISIL is an immediate threat, and dealing with Assad, where we are now, that's not going to put ISIL back in the box. ISIL, interchangeable. You know this drill by now. So remember what he said. The line coming from the warmonger group, and we'll see who they are, was that Assad is a magnet for terrorism. Yeah, he's a magnet because he's been targeted by Qatar, by Turkey, by Saudi, by NATO intelligence, and other pro-terrorist forces. You remember what Hagel had said. There is no change. There is no different direction. We could change Assad today, and that's not going to change all the dynamics. This is from a secret testimony, according to an insider account. Who are you going to replace Assad with? What kind of an army can take on ISIL? according to the AL Monitor and CNN. Now, remember that Hegel had sent a memo to Rice. This is now Susan Rice, the head of the National Security Council. I cringe in saying this, but that's her. And there was a big attempt to give out false leaks, to distort, to completely reverse the content of that critical memo from Hegel to Rice. I think what Hegel was saying is, you got to make up your mind. If you want to fight ISIL, you got to essentially accept the fact that you're working with Assad. And she can't do it because the career of Susan Rice and the career of Samantha Power, and not a few of these others, is based on humanitarian bombing. If you take away the call to overthrow Assad and Putin, of course, but for the moment it's the Middle East, we hope, if you're going to put out calls to overthrow Assad, that's the essence of the Samantha Power, Susan Rice position. If they're told, zip it and clobber ISIS, then their whole humanitarian bomber dimension, their whole Soros dimension goes out the window. They can't take it. So what has been going on then is simply to pretend that you can do both. And my estimate is that the Hegel memo of late October to Susan Rice was something like that. You've got to decide which it is. You can't have both, and you better support Assad because ISIS is by far the larger threat. Here we go. Here's a commentary. Let's see if we can cite this for you. This is some kind of a, I think he's a libertarian anyway. Daniel McAdams, Hegel out, Assad next. This was obvious. You can see my tweets. I'm sure I beat him to the punch. Hegel's fate was sealed in early October when it was reported that he sent a memo to Rice. We want that memo, by the way. We want that memo leaked. Hey, Cryptome. Hey, WikiLeaks. Hey, anybody. Get us that Hegel to Rice memo, and we'll begin to know more. But in this case, it's described as expressing concern over the Syria policy, especially the policy towards Assad had become incomprehensible. Unable to back down from the humanitarian interventionist demands that Assad must go, the administration simply pretended that Assad and his army on the ground fighting al-Qaeda and ISIS did not exist. Instead, the policy appeared to be one of fighting ISIS and Assad, the enemy of ISIS, at the same time, all the while training yet another tranche of moderate rebels who would presumably fight both ISIS and Assad. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So that's why he was out. We're also told Hegel didn't get along well with Rice and Samantha Power. Well, here it is. They're humanitarian bombers, and along with many, right? The Pentagon is full of contempt for Samantha Power, right? Loopy, loony, right? Humanitarian bomber. It just doesn't work. There were attempts to mediate this with Rice and McDonough. And notice, this all comes shortly after the arrival of General Allen. We have been pointing to Marine Corps General Allen, the disgraced General Allen of Jill Kelly fame, of November 2012 fame, all those emails to that Lebanese socialite woman. Who in God's name is she, and why is she getting hundreds and thousands of emails from General Allen? He's disgraced. How does that guy still have a security clearance? He and Petraeus should have been deprived of their security clearances long ago because of their philandering and God knows what else. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Remember to keep up with my work. Go to tarpley.net, all the radio, TV, books, articles, other appearances, Twitter feed. It's all there. And let me repeat, for the first time on this program, we are attempting to organize a weekend course, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in the political economy of the American system. That is to say, philosophical, epistemological method, and economics. This is for the heavy hitters. This is for the long ball hitters. This is for the serious people who want to become revolutionary leaders. There's no other way to put it in today's terms. It's most likely, not 100% guaranteed, but very likely to be on that weekend. I believe it's the 12th, 13th, and 14th of December, and here in Washington, D.C. And if you're interested, go to the Speakers Bureau, Speakers Bureau feature on my website, tarpley.net. Send me an email. There's a contact box there. You don't need to worry about the email address. Just send it to me. If you're interested in coming to this cadre school, 12th, 13th, 14th, and again, it will require effort. It will require some reading in advance. If you want to start reading in advance, get a hold of Surviving the Cataclysm, your guide to the worst financial crisis in American history. There's a 1999 edition. Better is the 2009 post-panic, post-world derivatives panic edition. So we'll be looking forward to that, and we'll have more details the next time around. What we're trying to do now is to essentially assess the degree of interest. So, short course, Political Economy of the American System, Washington, D.C., 12th, 13th, 14th December. Send it to me. Send your contact info to me, and I'll get back to you. Now, remember, when did all this start? We had, and we've written about it and talked about it, newspaper reports in, I guess it was April, saying that Skull and Bones Kerry and Samantha Power, the humanitarian bomber, were interested in attacking the Assad regime. Obama had said no several times, right? Notably the previous August, September, with the fake, staged, hooked up, false flag chemical weapons incident, and that Kerry and Samantha were reaching out for help from leading warmongers, and there were three. There was General Allen, General Petraeus, and General Keane, all part of a warmonger clique, all associated with the neocons. But now we've got to be a bit more specific. We will not do any more to talk only about neocons. We have to talk about Allen. Here's what the Washington Post says about it today, Tuesday, November 25th. The administration officials had leaked that Hagel had written a tough memo to National Security Advisor Rice, blasting the White House strategy for Syria. They don't tell you why. It's because Rice wants to bomb Assad. The squabble came 1 month after Obama appointed a retired general, John R. Allen. John R. Allen, if you don't know who he is, take a look at my website. There's a picture of him up there with his girlfriend, Jill Kelly, and his right-hand running dog, McGurk. John R. Allen, his envoy in charge of assembling a coalition against the Islamic State. Appointing Allen, according to the Washington Post, was a job that some Pentagon officials saw as diminishing Hagel's role. Yeah, sure, of course. The ISIS czar Allen has been working and scheming as per that plan, which goes back to April, which was in the newspapers. I think it was the Wall Street Journal. We'll check it. You can find it on tarpley.net. And the idea was, we've got to bomb Assad. That's their Johnny One Note. So there's all this stuff about White House micromanagement and so forth. This may have some validity, but this is not the main thing. And you followed with us. Again, I have to claim the best place to follow all this was precisely tarpley.net. So here we had in the November 15th edition, we had post-election war coup. GOP Chairman Ed Royce of the House Foreign Affairs Committee touts policy review on Syria, in reality a cover for the latest Kerry-Allen-McCain effort to bomb Assad and save ISIS and al-Qaeda. Bid comes with Obama overseas, Pentagon Chief Hagel, NSC's Ben Rhodes, counter that ISIS first is still U.S. policy. So the idea is there were the people who wanted to have the policy review and bomb Syria, and then there was Hagel who said, no, ISIS first. And we quoted, that's the quote we gave you before. And then just this past week, November 22nd, Obama repudiates the Alan Gates Petraeus Kerry campaign to spare ISIS and bomb Assad. Pressure mounting on Turkey's Erdogan to slam terrorists. Well, it's never linear. So this is a reverse. This is bad. Hagel should have hung on. Hagel should not have quit. Obama, of course, is a fool. Obama he lurches from something mildly promising like immigration now to this. And of course, the neocons had been the entire Bergdahl affair, the raving, foaming attacks on Obama over Bergdahl, I think had something to do with the desire to hit Hagel. And Hagel is now out. Now, who's going to be in? Here's where we got to mobilize. We're dealing, first of all, with Obama's Brisbane no. The Brisbane no was, are you planning a strategy that will overthrow Assad? The answer from Obama was no. The Washington Post, as we heard last week, Washington Post editorial page went ballistic. They want such plans. But now who's mentioned in this town, meaning in the oligarchy? Here we have Washington Post of today. Top contenders to replace Hagel. Michele Flournoy. She's got an accent grave over the first E. She's Michelle in the French style. Accent grave over the E. Remember, W.C. Fields would have done something with that. Michele Flournoy, Flournoy. Undersecretary of Defense from 09 to 12, under Gates and Panetta. Her rap is, she's viewed by some in the White House, and this, whoever the anti-war or anti-lunacy faction is, if there is one, in the White House, too uncritically supportive of the uniformed military's agenda. Now, when they say uniformed military, dear friends, that is a euphemism for such militarists as General Petraeus and General Allen. These two disgraced generals who we still find with security clearances planning new wars. And it all revolves around something called CNAS. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. So now, with Hagel going down, and he needed to stand up, obviously, and denounce the faction that got rid of him. These people never do. They're cowards. We know that. But Michele Flournoy, her story is too uncritically supportive of the uniformed military's perspective. Translated into good American, she's a stooge for Petraeus, Allen, and that clique. And she comes from the Center for a New American Security. Now, the center, you're going to have to add this to your list, right? You all know the Project for the New American Century. You all know about Brookings and the Institute for the Study of War with the Kagans. Here's another one. It's called the Center for a New American Security. And the trick with this one is, this is the Petraeus think tank. The main Bonapartist, golpista, putschist threat to the United States has his own think tank. And I'm wondering whether the money came from Henry Kravis of Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, known to be the general's money bags as he marches, he thinks, towards power. The CNAS, it was very big in the surge. We focused on the Kagans, right? Kim Kagan and Frederick Kagan. But we've also got Andrew Exum of the Center for a New American Security, who was part of the Petraeus McChrystal civilian board that included the Kagans, Biddle of the CFR, Cordesman of CSIS, but also CNAS. Meanwhile, by late 2009, we read in an article online, think tanks like CNAS had begun holding a series of events featuring military brass discussing the counterinsurgency campaign. September 2009, CNAS scholars joined General Petraeus at a National Press Club event on counterinsurgency, leadership in Afghanistan, Iraq, and beyond. And, of course, if you go to the CNAS webpage, or even if you go to the Wikipedia page, it's actually perhaps even clearer. It's clearer there than on their own page, because they do hide it a little bit. Here's what you find. Center for a New American Security. Well, there's a picture. Who's the picture? General David Petraeus delivers the keynote address at CNAS annual conference. It was founded in 2007 as a vehicle for Petraeus, public policy think tank, and it was founded by Madame Michele Flournoy, the coming aspirant now to be the head of the Pentagon. And in the quotes up here in the top of the Wikipedia article, we get something from James Steinberg. Speaking at the CNAS annual conference in June 2009, U.S. Central Command Commander General David Petraeus observed that CNAS has in a few years established itself as a true force in think tank and policy-making circles. Petraeus equals CNAS equals Flournoy. Allen, the ISIS czar, is operating on the inside, and Petraeus, with the help, I'm sure, of Kravis, is operating on the outside. A couple of more words on CNAS. General Allen is a part of it. Joe Lieberman, Richard Armitage from the State Department, right? The mud, blood, and beer expert from the Iran-Contra period. Michael O'Hanlon, warmonger. Marie-Louise Slaughter of the Slaughter Doctrine, right? The one who wanted to attack Syria, bomb Syria as a means of getting at Putin. Madeleine Albright, obviously several million Iraqi children it's worth killing them to get democracy. William Perry and others. So General Petraeus is a frequent guest at their meeting. So now we have these two disgraced generals. The comparison comes to mind is General Boulanger of France, right? The putschist, the coup guy who failed, lost his nerve, and he was found weeping on the grave of his mistress. So you would think that they might have brought in the Institute for the Study of War with the Kagans. That would have been too much. So here we have an extreme warmonger group, but it has a certain amount of democratic representation. We can call it the extreme democratic right-wing warmonger group. Concerning Michele Flournoy herself, we can assume, and we know, that in the councils of the Obama White House, she was constantly a voice for escalation, bombing, wider wars. She's a hawk. Think about Hillary Clinton, right? This seems to be the unfortunate pathology of women who get into these positions. They feel that if they're not the biggest warmonger in the room, they're going to be accused of weakness, feminine problems, whatever you want. Now, this is very bad. Obama should never have accepted. You should have rejected the resignation. And we don't know what happened, right? The stories we are told here in the Washington Post, it's all based on anonymous leakers. For example, I could never tell what Hagel's opinion was on anything, said a senior administration official involved in national security policy. Who's that? Susan Rice? Anthony Blinken? Who is it? Rhodes? I don't think Rhodes seemed to go with Hagel in the last exchange. So we don't know any of that, but we do know that this charming lady is a warmonger from CNAS. Hagel, for his part, I could compare him to Marshal Pétain in 1917. He took a defeated army and he tried to improve their morale with some creature comforts. A little bit of housing, a little bit of care, a little bit of, in the case of Pétain, a little bit better wine, what have you. That's Hagel. But now the warmongers are counterattacking. So here's what it's going to be. There has to be a confirmation hearing for Flournoy. That means the Senate Armed Services Committee. If they do that in January, which they may, That will then be run by McCain. So that will become a monstrous orgy, festival of warmongers that will be bashing whoever it is. If it's Flournoy, they'll bash her, and they'll say, promise us that you won't be a softy like Hegel, that we want to escalate, attack, and go to the brink, and roll back, and all the rest. This is actually quite tragic. The role of Susan Rice in this, well, we can assume it's bad, but I think, again, the main way to look at it is Allen on the inside, the ISIS czar, and Petraeus on the outside, with help from these useful idiots from the various Kerrys, Rice, and so forth, right? And remember that Petraeus is a bid for Bonapartist power, for the man on horseback, remember, and we may be headed in this direction. And as far as what motivates Obama, well, last week, a couple of days ago, we had the story on November 17th. It was a woman with a 9mm pistol in a holster walking around the White House just as Obama was delivering the immigration speech. That would have been the evening of November 17th. We now have, on the 24th of November, a certain R.J. Kapheim, K-A-P-H-E-I-M, who was found near the White House with a rifle, ammunition, and a big hunting knife in his car. And he's on his way to 2 years in the cooler for bringing those illegal weapons into the District of Columbia. And that, of course, was the same day that Coburn had talked about anarchy and violence in his commentary on the Obama immigration speech. So, doesn't look good. And remember, the 9mm woman, of course, seemed to be from the same neck of the woods as Joni Ernst. And now we got another guy from Iowa. The Iowa school is coming to town to answer the Ben Brisbane no. Back in a minute. So welcome back to World Crisis Radio, our post-Thanksgiving weekend program. Now, Moscow must see what has now happened. This is a step in the wrong direction, right? This is like, we can compare it to a number of things, but the fall of Hegel is not without severe international repercussions. The coming of the warmonger Flournoy. Oh, and by the way, it's not like she's the only candidate, right? She's the leading candidate. There's also another guy called Robert Work, Deputy Defense Secretary. He's the number 2 to Hegel, retired Marine colonel. Well, guess what? He's also from the Center for New American Security. So Work also served as chief executive of Center for the New American Security before the Senate confirmed him in April. He's blunt. He's the Pentagon number 2. He has had a major role in the Defense Department budget and a series of other things. He's the chairman of the Nuclear Deterrent Enterprise Review Group, with all those guys getting drunk in those nuclear missile silos. I guess that's not so good. We're also told Ashton Carter, but it's clear that Ashton Carter is only in there, as I think Work is too, but Ashton Carter especially, to make it less obvious that this is going to be controlled by the Center for the New American Security, meaning Petraeus, Allen, and their disgraced group of drunks and womanizers, which is also what they are, right? Check out the covers on the various books about these guys, right? With 45 automatic and a glass of scotch. All right, so here we are in late imperialism, that's for sure. Now, what does Moscow see? They're aware. Putin says Russia must prevent a color revolution. This is actually from Thursday of last week in Moscow. Russia has to prevent a color revolution. I welcome this. If you look at my book, Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, you will see right there that the whole point is the color revolution, right? That Obama is going to bring color revolutions, and there's extensive documentation in there. If you have friends in Russia, send them a copy of Obama, the Postmodern Coup. Get one for yourself. The Making of a Manchurian Candidate. Here's what Putin says. In the modern world, extremism is being used as a geopolitical instrument and for remaking spheres of influence. We see what tragic consequences the wave of so-called color revolutions led to. For us, this is a lesson and a warning. We should do everything necessary so that nothing similar ever happens in Russia. Yes, bravo. The whole point is color revolutions are designed to destroy the modern state. We here on this program celebrate the achievements and the unrealized potential of the modern state. Founded, or the pilot project whereof was founded when Dante Alighieri got to Milan just about this time of year, December 1310, and with the help of the Emperor Henry of Luxembourg, Holy Roman Emperor, put a Visconti on the ducal throne of Milan. And from that Visconti comes the modern state. Gian Galeazzo Visconti, late 1300s in particular. So this is a good warning from Putin. Extremist ideology is gaining momentum in the virtual sphere, through which extremist organizations are trying to recruit followers, and it must be prevented and combated. And of course, it's ISIS. Libya is now a failed state. Syria has been ravaged and decimated. Egypt has righted itself momentarily, and I hope permanently, with General Sisi, because that's the tradition. Egypt needs a strong government. Nasser showed the way. You need new Nassers, and the U.S. will always be opposed to that, right? Ambassador Patterson was kicked out for supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. So that's Putin. And then even more specific, within a day or two after that, Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, accused the West of seeking regime change in Russia. This was the Saturday, the 22nd of November. Lavrov accused the West of trying to use sanctions imposed on Moscow in the Ukraine crisis to seek regime change. Well, it's clear that's what they do in Iran. That's what they do in Russia. Quote, as for the concept behind the use of coercive measures, the West is making it clear it does not want to force Russia to change policy only, but wants to secure regime change. Quote, public figures in Western countries say there is a need to impose sanctions that will destroy the economy and cause public protests, a destabilization. So there's a 1-2 punch from Moscow against the destabilizers and the enemies of the modern state. Libertarians, the only thing one can fault is then if you want to maintain your own modern state, and you have every right, then don't foment other forces in the West, the libertarian Pauls, for example, that pretend to represent some kind of alternative. And we're just noting then in passing that little Rand Paul is now supporting an effort to pass a declaration of war for Syria and Iraq. One thinks it's going together with this coup attempt, right? Everybody in Washington knows that this putsch is going on, led by ISIS czar Allen, and that that's the movement. So everybody now seems to think if that's the train that's leaving the station, I got to jump on that train. Little Rand jumps on by offering to whatever threadbare, tattered credibility he has, to say, I'll support a declaration of war provided there's a time limit. But it would be, it seems to me, a step towards bombing Assad. All right, so there we are. Erdogan, to see what kind of a despicable individual Erdogan is. Erdogan has now joined the Larry Summers School. Women are inferior, says Erdogan. Women are inferior, and they should realize that the Islamic faith relegates them to an inferior position. Well, I'm sorry, that's not the way. Let me just point out that when Plato talked about philosopher kings in the Republic, he included philosopher queens, that women were seen as equal in their potential to carry out these affairs of state. And we're also noting that in Eastern Europe, there's now a pro-Putin sphere emerging, right? Orban of Hungary and the president of the Czech Republic these days. Both of them are quite friendly to Putin, so much so that the Anglo-Americans are trying to stage destabilization riots in the Czech Republic over this. Now, we also ought to catch up a little bit on the Iranian nuclear question. This is now adjourned for another 7 months. We are always of the opinion that jaw is better than war. as that British naval person put it. Georgia is better than World War, at least in this case. With ISIS, not. But here it is, totally different. And we have to remember, Iran has the right to a full nuclear fuel cycle, and that sanctions, economic warfare should be abandoned. They are harming Europe. If you embargo, if you sanction Russia and Iran, and you're in Europe, you've already hurt yourself mightily. I would look at this list of the people who participated in these last talks, and I see the presence of Catherine Ashton, that ignominious dumb cow whose term is over. She's out. She's no longer the European Union policy boss. That is now Mogherini, and Mogherini is much more promising. I would say to Obama and even to Kerry, why not? If you, for your own political needs, which I think are quite acute, if you really are focused on a deal with Iran, get Ashton out of there. Out with Ashton. Bring in Mogherini. She's going to be more reasonable, and play it that way. So, Hagel, of course, was the first and only enlisted combat soldier to ever make it to the top of the Pentagon. That's got to count for something. Susan Rice's battles. Susan Rice has fought many a battle, but we can't describe them on a family-oriented program like this one. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.